This is Command Post, a series of discussions about military matters from Time and the Center for a New American Security.
Eric, we as a nation, I think, made an extraordinary series of responses to the attacks of September 11th. We've built a whole new intelligence infrastructure. We toppled the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, pursued Osama bin Laden into Pakistan, where we lost him for a number of years, invaded Iraq. The impact of this actions of a very small group of people has been extraordinary. Do you think we as a nation overreacted?
I think we did, John. I think at least at the beginning of the conflict, and that may have set the tone for the rest of the decade. I think understandably after the 9/11 attacks, there was the instinct of the nation, and particularly the military and intelligence community, was to try and kill and capture your way out of this fight against al-Qaeda. The problem was the government in general, for the most part, did not really know much about al-Qaeda, and certainly not about terrorist networks and how they operate, and what was the best way to combat them. So the idea that you're going to go in, whether it initially be Afghanistan, but later in Iraq with a large footprint of American soldiers, really doesn't work very well. I mean, we saw this in Secretary Rumsfeld's famous memo in late 2003 with all the efforts there, and by then you have the insurgency rising in Iraq, and he asked the question of his top military and civilian advisors, are we actually generating more militants here than we're taking off the battlefield? And if so, why is that, and why can't we get our arms around it? And what that did, I think, was lead to some very innovative thinking within the government, particularly the bowels of the Pentagon. And the whole idea, and we write about this in our book, was are there elements of Cold War deterrence, that is, the theory that basically kept peace between the United States and the Soviet Union for all those decades, that we can apply today against al-Qaeda and terrorist networks? Now, the initial reaction was, of course not. Osama bin Laden and suicide bombers, they can't be deterred from attacking anybody. That may be true, but the revelation and the understanding that scholars inside and outside the government have was it takes more than just those guys to carry out an attack. They rely on a network to do their stuff. So you have logisticians, you have financiers, you have gun runners, you have a whole wide range of people that these attackers really depend on, and these people don't necessarily have the same fervor that the suicide bomber does. You can deter them, you can put pressure on them in their livelihoods, and once you start taking out pieces of that network, it makes it much harder to carry out the attack. And at the very least, what we've seen throughout the decade is it postpones that day when there may be another attack, and also drives down the ferocity of the attack, what we're seeing.
When we went into Afghanistan, the notion was we're going to topple the Taliban because they gave sanctuary to al-Qaeda. But then it seemed to morph in, we're going to rebuild Afghanistan into a country we can live with. We could have left in early 2002 with a victory, with the Taliban gone. Instead, we've stayed a decade. We've tried to rebuild Afghanistan into a more representative country. Is there a sense that maybe if we'd left earlier and didn't, invest so heavily in Afghanistan, we might be better off now?
Well, I think the argument would be just the opposite, Mark, that we didn't stay long enough in Afghanistan initially. The job was not finished there. While the Taliban may have been defeated, al-Qaeda may have been driven out of Afghanistan after the 9/11 attacks. They were next door into Pakistan. They hadn't been totally eliminated. The U.S. took their eye off the key ball at that point, which is the terrorist threat from al-Qaeda, and shifted to Iraq, a whole new theater. And it also changed the international dynamics. We had the international community fully behind the United States' effort to combat al-Qaeda and its host government in Afghanistan, the Taliban. Once the U.S. shifted into Iraq, it became much murkier. We lost a lot of that support. And Iraq, which was not a terrorist haven beforehand, became a magnet for terrorism. Meanwhile, back in Afghanistan, the focus on Iraq allowed the Taliban and to some extent al-Qaeda to reconstitute, so that as we go forward to many years later, the threat reasserts itself there to face the problems that we're now addressing in Afghanistan today.
St. Augustine said that the only purpose of a war is to win a better peace. And we did not do the hard work required to win a better peace in Afghanistan before we started fighting another war in Iraq. And we're only now starting to build that better peace, build a post-war situation which is going to make future wars, future terror strikes less likely. both in Iraq and in Afghanistan. But after many, many years of great pain for the people of those countries, for the soldiers, the military families, the people of the United States. And so I think one of the big lessons we have to learn from this last decade is not just how to win battles, but also how to win the peace that follows.